Ladies and gentlemen, Zoran Mamdani has now officially taken the next step in his socialist agenda because he is announcing city-run grocery stores in New York City. And let's be very clear about what this actually means. This is not just some feel-good plan about helping people buy cheaper eggs and bread. This is New Yorkers being asked to fund a government-backed grocery experiment in a city already on the brink of a financial collapse, while Mamdani tries to use government to move deeper into ordinary economic life and sell that as compassion. And the reason that this matters is because once you look at the cost, once you understand how difficult the grocery business actually is, and once you look at the risk this creates for private stores already trying to survive, the whole pitch starts looking a lot less like a solution and a lot more like the next phase in his agenda that should concern people. And so we got a lot to get into because this is far bigger than just groceries, ladies and gentlemen. And so we got to break it all down. As always, if you do enjoy the content, smash that thumbs up. That's the very best way to let me know, and subscribe to the channel to stay locked in with all the content in the future. Let's get right into it.
Mayor Mamdani celebrating his 100th day in office this weekend, and he finally revealed his plan to open the first city-owned grocery store.
Fox 9's Morgan Mackay is here now with a closer look at how this is going to work. And Morgan, this store comes with a big price.
Yeah, $30 million, Stephen, Natasha. That's how much Mamdani administration says it will cost just to build the grocery store itself. And they don't have a price tag yet on how La Marqueta in East Harlem to be the site of the first city-owned grocery store. The land that La Marqueta sits on is already owned by the city and has for decades hosted an array of vendors. Mamdani says by waiving rent and real estate taxes, this store will be able to offer discounts on basic groceries. The plan is to then hire a third-party grocery operator to operate and staff the store. Mamdani's team says they hope to have the store open by the end of the year, but the city council will have to still approve this funding. City-owned grocery stores was a major campaign promise, and Mamdani, celebrating his 100 days in office over the weekend, spoke more about the plan.
Eggs will be cheaper. Bread will be cheaper. Grocery shopping will no longer be an unsolvable equation. Now, some will insist that city-owned businesses do not work, that government cannot keep up with corporations. My answer to them is simple. I look forward to the competition.
Now, Mamdani on the campaign trail said the goal was to put these city-owned grocery stores in areas that lack access to full-service grocery stores. However, there are several grocery stores within a half-mile radius of La Marqueta, including a city fresh market just 1 block away. Some of those smaller independent grocery stores have been fighting for years for legislation that would give them access to food at wholesale prices, something that is only available to large chains and big box retailers. Anthony Pena, the national president of the National Supermarket Association, says that Mamdani's plan only hurts small businesses already fighting to offer food at lower costs.
And ladies and gentlemen, herein lies the part Mamdani really does not want to deal with, because this is where his entire sales pitch starts collapsing. He keeps acting like the answer to expensive groceries is for the government to come in and build its own grocery store. Like government playing supermarket is somehow a serious solution. But that does not fix the reason small grocers are struggling. The actual problem, well, at least one, is wholesale pricing, supplier access. The actual problem is that independent stores and smaller chains have been getting squeezed for years, while the big box retailers and major chains get better deals, better leverage, and better inventory. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, there is already legislation being proposed in New York aimed at this exact issue. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Consumer Grocery Pricing Fairness Act. This is what the small business owners have been fighting for and forcing lawmakers to at least listen to. And so ask yourself this: if the real structural problem is wholesale access and pricing, that is what the business owners are telling them. Then why is Mamdani not leading there? Why is he not trying to fix the rules so smaller grocers can compete? Why is he not trying to lower costs for the businesses already feeding these neighborhoods? Why is the answer once again more government, more spending and taxpayer-backed store? Because that's what this really is. $30 million for the first East Harlem location in an area where there are already grocery stores, some of which are independent grocery stores nearby. And the answer is because this is not really about fixing the market. This is about Mamdani using government as a substitute to fix the market. That is the socialist instinct every single time. Instead of asking, how do we remove the distortions, the regulations, the cost burdens, the price disadvantages, and the barriers that are hurting businesses already serving these communities, the answer becomes, let the government step in, own something, subsidize something, and compete directly. That's not reform, ladies and gentlemen. That is government substitution. And Mamdani was asked why it will take a full year to open the city's first government-run grocery store while privately owned stores open in record time. He responded with, of course, a long-winded explanation, hiding behind bureaucracy and planning without giving a clear answer. Take a listen.
You said this store will open in 2029 and that the first of your grocery stores will open next year. Why is it taking so long? I feel like a bodega opens every other week across New York City in every neighborhood. Why take so long to start this?
Well, I think for a few reasons. The first is that we are talking about building something from the ground up. We're talking about this city's first city-run grocery store in Manhattan that we need to both design, that we also need to construct. We're also going to be constructing it using prevailing wages. And it's also one part of a larger ecosystem, not just in terms of La Marqueta, but also here on this strip. We've seen the MTA has just completed their work in this very area. This requires a lot of interagency and intergovernmental coordination that we're going to be seeing. The store that will be open next year in 2027 and the additional stores that will be open by the end of 2029 will not require this same scale of production. The reason that we're announcing this is so that we can get started on this.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about that budget, because this is where the whole thing starts looking even more unserious. Mamdani's own budget framing said that the city still faces a multi-billion-dollar budget gap. Even after reducing the size of the deficit. And so you're not launching a city-run grocery chain from a position of access stability and cash. No, ladies and gentlemen, you're doing so while dealing with a real budget problem. That means every long-term obligation matters more. Every experiment matters more. Every political branded project matters more. And that is why this is dangerous. Not because of one grocery store by itself that changes the entire city overnight, but because this is how the mission creep starts. One store becomes 5 stores in Mamdani's vision. A pilot becomes an operational model. A symbolic experiment becomes a permanent taxpayer obligation until it no longer can function as is.
Zoran Mamdani moving ahead with his plan to open government-run grocery stores, announcing the first of 5 sites will be up and running next year. Fox Business correspondent Madison Allworth reports live from our New York City newsroom. A lot of people are saying it takes a year to open a grocery store.
And a lot of money, too, John. This first store is going to cost $30 million. That's nearly half of the $70 million budget that Mayor Mamdani has proposed for all 5 city-run grocery stores. He announced this first one last night at his 101st day celebration. The store is going to be located in East Harlem in La Marqueta, and the plan is for it to be open next year.
We are building a brand new store on city-owned land currently sitting empty in East Harlem. A neighborhood where nearly 40% of households receive public assistance or SNAP in the past year.
Because it's on city-owned land, they will not have to pay rent on the property. Mamdani pointed out that grocery prices in the city have increased since the pandemic, but he failed to point out how city-run grocers in other cities have failed to actually help residents. Similar efforts in places like Kansas City have struggled to stay afloat despite millions in taxpayer dollars. Sun Fresh Market permanently closed this August after suffering from high crime, empty shelves, and unsustainable losses. So despite over $17 million in taxpayer investments since 2016, the project failed to provide a stable food source. But it's full steam ahead for city-owned grocery stores here in the Big Apple. Mamdani promised on the campaign trail the grocery stores will be available in each borough. He says that will be accomplished by the end of his term. John?
Well, at a year to open every one of them, and he wants to open that many. I'm not quite sure if he can do that, but we'll see. Madison, thanks very much. Now over to Sandra.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the data, when it comes to grocery retail, it's always characterized as being a low net profit margin business, around 1 to 2% in the US and Western Europe. That means there's very little room for waste, political pricing, or bad management. It's known as one of the lowest margin businesses around. And so when politicians like Mamdani come in and act like they can just go ahead and wave some magic wand and make everything cheaper, somebody still eats the loss. In a city-owned grocery store, that somebody is the taxpayer. Low margin business plus political promises usually equals permanent subsidy. And here's the thing that they don't want to tell you. Even when government subsidizes retail, it does not automatically mean those savings fully show up for consumers, right? And so even if you are sympathetic to the idea, even if you say, okay, maybe city support could lower price somewhat, that still does not answer the deeper question. Is this the best use of taxpayer money? Is this the smartest way to improve affordability for the most people? Or is this just another flashy ideological project that sounds compassionate while avoiding the harder structural reform that would help every store and every shopper, right? And that is where I think Mamdani's whole pitch collapses, because if he was really serious, if he really cared about making groceries cheaper across the board, he'd focus on fixing wholesale pricing discrimination, lower the cost of doing business, improve security, be tougher on crime for those who commit theft, cut regulatory friction, give smaller stores a real shot to compete. You know, the things that would actually help existing neighborhood grocers, bodegas, and independent supermarkets. That would actually widen the benefit beyond a handful of politically chosen storefronts. That would actually address the reason prices are high instead of just using government as a workaround. But that's not what Mamdani's doing, ladies and gentlemen. He's doing the more ideological thing, saying government should own more, operate more, compete more, and taxpayers should carry more of the risk. And that is why I say this is not really about groceries. This is the next step in his agenda. It's the same worldview that says, if the private system is struggling, don't reform it. Replace pieces of it with government. And so, no, I don't look at this as some genius affordability breakthrough. I see a politician using a very emotional issue, grocery costs, to push a city-run solution that's going to be expensive, risky, and politically convenient. And for a city already under budget pressure being asked to bankroll a retail model, it does not need to be in. And I see existing smaller grocers being ignored on the very reforms that would actually help them compete. And seeing taxpayers being told to clap for it because the branding sounds compassionate. That's the real story. Mamdani's not fixing why groceries are expensive in New York. He's not solving the supplier problem. He's not doing anything about wholesale pricing issues. He's not solving operational cost issues. He's using government to sidestep those very issues and hoping symbolism carries the politics. And maybe that works on a campaign stage, and hey, even maybe that works in New York City. Hey, I don't know, maybe it ends up carrying weight. We talk about New York City, of course. But in the real world, somebody has to pay for the store. Somebody has to absorb the losses, ladies and gentlemen, and somebody has to manage the operations, and somebody has to live with the consequences if city crowds out businesses while still failing to lower prices enough to justify the cost. And that somebody is the taxpayer. But those are my thoughts in the update. Now let me hear from you by commenting down below. As always, if you enjoy the content, hit that like and subscribe to the channel for more. And as always, until next time.